Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Wherever you're joining in from, hello. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on high-impact student employment programs. Whether you've been working with student employees all academic year or you're busily preparing to onboard, this webinar is for you. And I couldn't be more excited to talk you through the research behind high-impact practices and the ideas I have as to how you can be more intentional about handling your student employment programs. Thank you so much for making an effort to be here and committing part of your day to learning. I promise to make this next half hour very worth your time. Here's our agenda for today. I'll start by defining high-impact practices and outlining the 8 tenets that each practice has in common. We'll dig deeper into each of the 8 tenets, sometimes providing a little more background or context, and ending each section with actionable takeaways that you might consider using in your own student employment programs, or SEPs. And lastly, I'll briefly wrap up by outlining why you should care about these tenets, sharing the benefits that high impact practice, or HIP, values can bring to your workplace. And yes, I'll probably be using both the HIP and SEP acronyms throughout this presentation just to save a few seconds here and there. So just a friendly reminder, HIP or HIP stands for High Impact Practices. SEP stands for Student Employment Programs. And I promise I won't use any other acronyms today. By way of introduction, before I jump into content, hi, my name's Leah. If this is your first contact with the Career and Internship Center, hello, we are so glad you're here. We're the centralized career center on campus, and we provide career guidance to students of almost all majors and school years. Everyone in our office works to connect students with a different resource or audience. We do everything from review students' resumes to connect them with mentors. And I work to get students in touch with employers like you. So my role is focused mostly around outreach and event coordination, really any opportunity where employers and students can connect. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today. Now, before we begin, let me set 3 expectations with you. First of all, let's all get on the same page by agreeing to the premise that student employment has the potential to be a high-impact practice that benefits the student, your unit, and the entire campus at large if we can intentionally design and run our programs. This whole presentation is centered around this concept, so if you have no idea what that actually means, you will by the end of this half hour. Second, assuming we agree to this premise, we then believe that the goal of intentional design and management is to create a work environment that enables students to learn, engenders student motivation, results in high quality work, and sets up everybody for success. And lastly, I must be upfront that sadly you don't get a fancy certificate at the end of this course that says you've completed HIP SEPs with Leah Bothwell. Although, if anyone knows how my name could be permanently printed on a formal UW certificate, let me know. But while you don't get any recognition for attending this presentation today, you do get a gold star in my book for being a part of work that I think is genuinely, truly important. And I hope that by the end of today, you can see why. Now, I'll be honest, when I began my work on this webinar, I had no idea that high impact practices were an actual thing, like as in with a capital T. So basically what I'm saying here is that HIPs are a previously defined set of educational practices that was researched and became a topic for a published work. So let me share with you everything that I learned. HIPs were established in 2008 by George Koo and colleagues at the Association of American Colleges and Universities. And they basically defined a set of active learning practices, 10 in total. And the operative word here is active. So it's more than just sitting in a classroom. It's things like first-year seminars or learning communities. Internships are also included here, and I wanted to call out specifically that your employment opportunity doesn't actually need to be called an internship in order to be considered HIP. What binds all 10 of these learning practices together is 8 elements. So HIPs incorporate each of these. In order to be considered a HIP, the practice must have performance expectations set at appropriately high levels, a significant investment of time and effort by students over an extended period of time, interactions with faculty and peers about substantive matters, experiences with diversity, frequent, timely, and constructive feedback, periodic, structured opportunities to reflect and integrate learning, opportunities to discover relevance of learning, and public demonstration of competence. Now, if we understand that these values or elements or tenets are all imposed in the course of HIPS, it begs the question, well, who's responsible for imposing them? And if you guessed you are, you're correct. You are in the manager's seat, which means that you assume accountability over instituting these tenets in your student employment program. And this ties back to an earlier slide where we've touched on the need for intentionality in our design and management. So from setting performance expectations at appropriately high levels, all the way to giving students a forum to demonstrate their understanding, you are the one who gets to decide how these values show up in your daily work with student employees. It's worth noting here that these are not the high impact practices. HIPs are the type of learning activities that all feature these tenets in their work. So a HIP would be your internship or your employment program. And what you see on this screen are the values of HIPs. Through the rest of our presentation today, I'll be diving into each one of these bolded words individually, helping you understand what exactly they mean and how you might consider placing specialized focus on them as you design and manage a HIP student employment program. Taking it from the top, let's begin with expectations. So I'm going to provide examples of how you can set and align expectations through every state of your SEP and how you might measure what exactly is appropriate when it comes to gauging performance levels of your student employees. Setting expectations is best done as far in advance as possible, which in the grand scheme of employment etiquette means that you should be thinking about the expectations you set in your recruiting practices and how you then align with these in your onboarding practices. You have a lot of freedom to assert expectations about the cadence of performance reviews, scheduling options, project descriptions, and timelines. So take time to put them in your job description or reflect on other skills that are an absolute necessity so that you can assess for them in your application review and interview processes. What I'm trying to communicate in this slide is that you hold a lot of power and responsibility here to mold your candidates' expectations through the actions that you take before they even step through the door. And when they do officially shake your hand, accept the job, and settle into their workspace on their first day, your work setting expectations continues in things like your performance evaluations, onboarding checklists, and even how your team interacts with each other on a daily basis. So if you want something done, it's up to you to communicate that, which you can do with your words, written or spoken, or your actions. So remember, the full tenet that we're working on here is setting performance expectations at appropriately high levels. So let's not forget about the word appropriate. How do we know what's appropriate or not? Well, on one hand, you have weekly work limits to abide by, currently capped at 19 and a half hours a week. So it'd be inappropriate, for example, to make students work 25 hours. That's just a logistical thing. But beyond that, there's a lot of variation that we have to work with when it comes to student employees. Different majors, school years, cultures, family and work backgrounds, and availability all mean that there's no one-size-fits-all answer to this question. And of course, there's the added level of difficulty that comes when you're setting performance expectations with a new hire. You don't even really know them yet. How could you possibly guess what's appropriate for them or not? If you want to assess what's appropriate for a student, you have to know what you're assessing. So make this measurable by understanding your end goal first and work your way backwards from there. So if you want to know, I wonder if my employee can handle creating the amount of graphics we need every quarter. Well, you might start by knowing your end goal. So put a number to the amount of graphics that you need. Say it's 200. Then you can work your way backwards from there. What qualities or background experience might someone need to be able to handle that volume? How could you assess for growth during that goal, towards that goal? So my final slide here for this section and every section beyond this is an idea slide. Basically, I want you to walk away with some ideas of how you can support this tenet in your student employment program. How can you set performance expectations at appropriately high levels? Well, you could create a section in your position description devoted to necessary and unbiased expectation information. What do you want candidates to know about their role responsibilities or even your office culture that you could screen for right up front? You could develop an interview rubric and a predetermined set of questions that test against core competencies. So if you say in your JD that candidates will be expected to manage and process paperwork, for example, what skills could you test for in your interview process? You could ask candidates during the interview what expectations they have. This gives you a chance to realign before a job offer is ever even made. You could set aside time in your onboarding schedule to go over expectations of workplace culture. What's your policy on dress code, teleworking, calling in sick? You could build time in your schedule to candidly check in often with student employees after assigning them a project. And you could revisit your employment goals formally. And these last two are meant to help you build rapport with your student employees, which helps foster trust and can encourage honesty if a student needs to report that they're struggling with performance. Again, this can help you realign expectations and understand what's an appropriate performance level. Tenet number 2, investments. It's your responsibility to appeal to students. Basically, show them that their time and effort and investments are worth it. So in this section, we're going to talk about type 2 fun and how to foster buy-in. Now, in the most basic sense, investments are short-term decisions with long-term impact. You put your money away for a long, long time, and one day you could be a millionaire. Or you decide to create a training plan, and then one day you've run your first marathon. And I want to make a point here that so rarely are investments fun. It's not fun to say goodbye to money that you can't spend for 40 years, or lace up your shoes every day and do your training runs, or, dare I say, come to work every day. And if you've never heard of the 3 types of fun, it's a very, 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 very scientific scale that measures fun from type 1, which is fun while it's happening, normal fun, like going out to eat with friends, to type 3 fun, which is not fun at all, like watching paint dry. Type 2 means it probably wasn't fun when it was happening, but it sure was fun in retrospect. Something that involved a challenge or a risk, possibly was risky on the reward, and involved learning a valuable lesson in return for hardship on some scale. Like, you guessed it, investing money in your retirement account or running a marathon. The act of convincing someone that their investment is worth the time and energy starts with your clear vision. So rarely does someone just go for a run and then all of a sudden they've run 26.2 miles, right? No, you say, I think I want to run a marathon. And then from there, it's a step-by-step process that involves communicating at each step along the way, leveraging feedback, motivating in whatever way makes sense, right? So you set training goals, right? You communicate with yourself. You reassess when your knee hurts, right? That's leveraging feedback. And you buy yourself a new pair of running shoes so that you can look really cool running down 45th Avenue, right? That's motivating. So translating this from the running example to the actual theme at hand, if you're thinking about how to make your SEPs gratifying for student employees, these are the steps that you can take to foster higher and higher levels of investment in their role. So what does this actually look like in practice? How do we communicate and provide feedback and motivate? Well, you might start by talking with your student about the short-term and long-term goals of their employment. If they've already identified what's important to them and you can help them on their journey to meet a goal, that student is automatically more invested. You could ask them their opinions about where they might struggle in their projects and schedule regular cadence meetings to check in with them. This fosters trust and credibility and helps students overcome challenges. It's a big part of type 2 fun. You could get a sense of what motivates them: recognition, flex time, social time, gifts of gratitude. By understanding what rewards student employees, you can make projects or responsibilities feel all the more gratifying. And you could ask for feedback immediately after presenting an idea. Here, you're showing students that you respect their opinions and you want them to feel included, which helps foster buy-in. Onward to the third tenet, interactions. As managers, you are responsible for creating opportunities wherein your student employees can meaningfully interact with faculty and peers about substantive matters. You are truly poised to make a huge impact in this space. Before I provide some examples of how you can do this, I do want to take a moment to make a point about why we should care about who students interact with outside of the office. After all, we hired them to do a job in our office. Why does it matter who they talk to when they're not at work? To be frank, because you can. Students are spending up to 19 and a half hours a week at your office, which is about as much, if not even a little bit more, maybe, than students are spending in the classroom. You are in a great position, if not the best position, to make an impact on the ways students interact with each other, purely as a byproduct of being in a position of leadership at the place where they spend most of their time. We want our college students to interact with others. I listed a few reasons here why interaction is important. I'll invite you to read through these linked sources at a later time. But to start, we want students to be social so that they have a coping mechanism that fights against stress and feelings of meaningless. On a related note, between COVID, the rigor of classes, the new environment that being at college poses, and the increased dependence on technology, students are prone to feel more lonely than ever before, and we want students to beat the loneliness epidemic. And lastly, we want students to be accountable. We want them to take responsibility for their own struggles and interests and help them become full-fledged members of society who are capable of making personal connections and rational decisions. So because we can, we should. What does this look like? How do we get them to engage with others outside of our office? Well, we might consider collaborative projects that bring multiple student employees together. Or if you're coming up short for ideas on things students can work on together, ask students for their ideas on how they can do that. Assign projects that necessitate interviewing or meeting with a professor or a staff member. What if your student research assistant is assigned to conduct literature reviews and they're unsure of where to start? Encouraging them to see a professor could be great motivation to get them to attend office hours for the first time. You could ask student employees about their coursework for the quarter. Perhaps a project that you assign overlaps with projects that they've been assigned for a class. If your student employee is handling social media or online work for you, you could ask them to feature their friends or peers in posts or reels. Our student intern recently created a reel where she interviewed students at our career fair, and she asked attendees how they got ready. And that was such a great way to involve peers on campus that made everyone feel included, and it was way more effective than our staff making that video. Last idea, you could build an ambassador component into your job descriptions, wherein student employees represent your office across campus. Getting students to interact with peers by tabling or attending other events is a great way to encourage social interaction. By now, you should realize that you are in a great position to bring students together. So I wanted to take this one step further by emphasizing how you can do this with a focus on celebrating diversity. Remember that here we're thinking about how we can bring students into contact with diverse peoples and subjects. So to start, do you have a diversity statement? And is it public on your website and in your job postings? Some students may never have seen a diversity statement before, and reading yours might be their first contact. You're likely already doing this next one, given that you work for a university, but you should be conducting recruiting equitably. By this, I mean that you can expose students to diverse cultures, backgrounds, ways of thinking, ages, and lifestyles simply by having a diverse office staff. So if your office is not currently diverse, consider how your recruiting operations may not be attracting diverse talent and take steps to change that. Assign work that necessitates interaction with teammates. This gets students into situations where they have to problem solve with others who, more likely than not, have different opinions and ideas. Set an example by being mindful of your own language and behaviors. And finally, encourage student participation in extracurricular activities, where students have additional opportunities to meet others with diverse interests, opinions, and upbringings. All right, we've made it halfway through our HIP tenants. Let's continue on with feedback. Managers should be responsible for giving frequent, timely, and constructive feedback. Let's discuss why this is important to an office culture and what your feedback should look like in order to be effective. But first, just for fun, for those of you who are following along with my voice instead of the slides, this is a comic of a microphone giving off too much feedback. He has a speech bubble giving an awful lot of criticisms. Have you ever had someone, particularly a leader, give you feedback like this? I bet that you still know their name and can remember what it was like just yesterday, what it would have felt like to receive their harshness. I bet you didn't like them very much in that moment, and that their comments changed your perspective on them. I personally will never forget the person who told me that I was terrible at graphic design. I didn't respect them very much after that. The point here is that learning to both give and receive both positive and constructive feedback is a skill, and it's critical to students' future success in the workplace. It's basically a core virtue of being, quote, professional. And if you're a student entering the big, scary world of jobs for the first time, you have no idea what being a professional even means, how to take someone else's judgment, what office etiquette translates into, how to act, right? Giving and receiving feedback is one of the greatest things that helps them learn all about these skills and more. This slide shows elements of effective feedback on the left and elements of ineffective feedback on the right. Effective feedback can look like a lot of different things, but I think the best formula combines specificity, timeliness, action, and premeditation. Say you have a student employee who isn't getting their work done. You might put a meeting on their calendar, and you could name the meeting something like meeting to discuss workload or allude to the purpose of the meeting in the calendar invite. Your feedback in the meeting might start by telling the student what you notice, giving them a chance to identify for you what's going on, and then giving them specific actions they can take that could rectify the problem. So filling in the example here, you could start with, so Leah, I noticed that the social media posts are going out later in the day than your teammates have requested, and sometimes they're not even going out at all. What do you think might be causing this? Leah might tell you she's been tired lately because of exams. And this might prompt a larger discussion about stress management, work priorities, hours, etc. You might end the conversation saying, social media is really important to our office because it's how we communicate with the student body. Posts going out late isn't a super big deal, but if they don't go out at all, that means we missed out on a crucial opportunity to connect students with our services. Can I take something off your plate so you can prioritize this above everything else? It'd be unwise, on the other hand, to say something on the right-hand side of this slide. Telling students that they're making you look bad or refusing to hear them out could cause them to be distrustful of you. I'll encourage you to come back to the slide and give yourself feedback on your own feedback giving style. Where could you improve? Okay, so here's some ideas on how you can better give frequent, timely, and constructive feedback. You could schedule 10 minutes at the start of their workday on a regular basis to check in. You could ask the student to provide feedback on themselves. So like, where do you feel like you're struggling right now? Or what do you think you're best at? You could schedule regular performance reviews. You could ask your student for regular feedback on others, perhaps you or your meeting structure or the office culture. Are you giving them regular opportunities to provide feedback? And lastly, when a student asks for feedback or identifies that they're having trouble, set the examples that they can learn through you. You are likely one of their core mentors, whether you know it or not, and they're looking to you for examples of how to navigate through life and the office. We've got 3 tenants to go, and the last 3 are actually pretty integrated. Let's dive in by talking about how you can craft periodic, structured opportunities to reflect and integrate learning. What does that even mean? Basically, we're talking about active learning. This isn't a math class where we teach students addition and help them arrive at the same answers every time. You know as well as I do that the problems that exist in your office are very gray. Here are some of the ones that I worked on in the last year. For example, like what day of the week is best to host a career fair, or we're noticing declining student attendance, or we don't have a great business continuity plan, right? And there's no easy or correct answer to any of these. Your student employees are learning skills every day that enable them to move throughout the world to make judgments, problem solve, plan ahead, and think critically. So when you're thinking about how you can help them reflect and integrate learning, it's literally as simple as just giving them a judgment to make, a problem to solve, a plan to create, and a reason to think critically. And that might look like providing a problem that exists in the real world, or perhaps even better, one that exists in your office. So give them a framework that they can apply the skills that they're learning towards. And my second idea is to assist student employees with the units of learning. This might look like how to conduct research, how to make a SWOT analysis, how to analyze profit impact, or how to arrive at the best course of action. All we really want from our student employees is for them to feel like they've learned something through working with us that they can take out into the big and scary real world to make it a better place, right? We want them to feel like their time in our office was relevant. So how do we foster that? Well, through skill development, which we kind of just talked about, and language skills. And I really want to spend time on the language piece of this tenet because I think it's really important that we feel a sense of responsibility to A, give voice to all the things that we're teaching students, and B, that we help them articulate that in ways that go beyond our office. All students in all jobs use or develop skills that would be interesting and attractive to future employers. Think about it, right? You're an employer. When you were hiring for your jobs, what were you hoping your future candidate would look like? Did you hope that they have a great work ethic, that they were organized, that they were teachable? Did you get that? Are you working on it together in the workplace? And how are you doing that? I think about my previous internships and feel like one of the top skills I learned was how to speak confidently. But like no one sat me down and said, okay, Leah, time to work on your confident speaking skills. Instead, they assigned me projects wherein I had to present. And I did a lot of those, and I learned how to do it authentically for me. And that's what we want students to know how to do, to take what it is that they're working on and translate it onto their resume or their narrative of their personal brand. There's a lot of different ideas that I have as to how you can support relevance of learning in your student employment program. For example, you could review the resources that are on our website with students periodically throughout the course of their employment. You could ask students if there's something specific that they want to learn. You could give them an opportunity to self-identify what's important to them and articulate why, right? You could allow for flexibility in their role, allow them to attend meetings, present projects, provide trainings to peers, or delegate roles to peers. This can allow them to learn things about their working style and how they best operate in an office setting. You could build professional development into their role by providing access and time for LinkedIn Learning. If you don't know much about analyzing Instagram stats, for example, you can't teach them how to do that, but LinkedIn Learning could. And lastly, you could make time before student employment ends to assist with resume review. Or you could build time into their schedule for students to see a career coach at my workplace, the Career and Internship Center. And yes, that's a shameless plug. And finally, the last core tenet of HIPS is demonstration. How can we let students show us that they have learned something through their employment? And I'll be honest, when I read this, I was like, duh, PowerPoint. But that just goes to show how much I like slide decks. It's not to say that you can't have them create a little presentation, especially if they've been working on a specific project that they could share out findings for. But then I thought, okay, well, demonstrations are public by nature. So where else could you get them in front of a group? Well, you could assign work or projects to a large team of student employees, and you could regularly rotate them into leadership roles. Or you could encourage them to bring a problem that they're experiencing at work to office hours with a faculty member. And my final two options, chances are pretty good that your student employee is doing some pretty public-facing things already. Maybe they answer your phones or send proposals to stakeholders, handle your social media, or keep buildings secure. So maybe you don't need to make them do another demonstration to show you that they've learned something. Maybe you just need to give a voice to what they're demonstrating already and acknowledge that you see their strengths and growth. As I wrap up the presentation today, I'd like to leave you with some final ruminations on why we should care about HIP SEPs. Honestly, because they can be life-changing. Corny, but true. George Koo and his team at the Association of American Colleges and Universities learned that they can enhance learning in all forms for students. They can increase students' GPAs, they can improve students' willingness to persist beyond hardship and stay the course in work and school, and they can help them earn degrees faster. And for us, the managers, they can increase the retention of your student employees in your office, improve the quality of their work, which helps your office, and they can give you a reason to strengthen your own management skills, which helps your own professional development and ultimately can help you beyond your current workplace. I've loved talking you through high impact practices and their associated core values today, and I hope that you walked away with at least one idea of how you can more intentionally design or manage your own student employment program. Again, my name is Leah Bothwell, and you can reach me via leahkb@uw.edu. If you work here at UW and manage a student employee of your UW office, we'd love for you to scan this QR code to join our community of campus professionals created to help all students become career ready. Again, please only scan this QR code if you work here at UW. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's webinar. Happy managing and take care.